Hi, this is Dr. Linda Horton, and this is the Helpful Homeschooler. Today, I'm going to be talking about different kind of learners. Specifically today, I'm going to be talking about the oral learner. There are a lot of different kinds of learners. We have those learners that are experiential. Our oldest son was that way. He had to experience something to really get it. He was one of those kids that you could say the stove is hot, and he would look at you, and then he would touch the stove. And you would say, I told you the stove was hot. Our second son and our fourth son were really studious. They could read something and they could understand it. Didn't have to touch it, didn't have to feel it. If I did manipulatives, they loved it, but they pretty well got it when they read it. Our third son, though, was an oral learner. And there are those who can read it and get it. There are those who like to experience it, like to see, feel, and touch. Kinetic learners are those that like to move with it. And then there's the oral learner. And that's the learner that needs to hear it. And a lot of times, especially in schools, and I don't want to down any school. I don't want to, if a curriculum works for you or it works for a school, then praise God, do it. But there are so many kids that are in a PACE program at a school that they sit all day at a desk and they write, they read and they write, and they're oral learners, and it's not working for them. And we had a son that was an oral learner and we didn't know it. And he was in public school doing just barely doing okay. Not happy, we knew he wasn't happy. Through a series of circumstances, we ended up homeschooling him. And I tried my best to get through to him, to help him, and nothing was working. And one day, after much prayer, one day it dawned on me that if he heard something, if I had given him some instructions orally and gave him a lesson orally, there was a reason I did it, I cannot tell you now why, and he got it. And I thought, isn't that interesting? So I began to do everything with him. He was in 6th grade at this time. So think of the time that had passed. If I would have had him in homeschooling earlier, it would have been such a blessing for him and for us. But you know, God has new mercies every day. And so it worked out. So what I did was, when I gave him an assignment, we read it together. And I gave him the luxury of sitting by himself and reading it out loud. And when he read it out loud, he got it, it soaked in, he understood it. I gave him his tests orally for the longest time. And let me tell you what a blessing this was. One day, after we had been doing this, I don't know, maybe 6 months, he came to me and he said, I think I can play the piano. And I said, really? And we had a piano there, and we had a little organ. And he said, I think I can. I said, well, okay. And he began to play beautifully. Never had a lesson, never, of course, we were in church. Of course, you know, he loved music. But what was so beautiful was God had designed him to be an oral learner for this specific reason. He is now our praise and worship minister at our church. And he can read music now. After many years, he took a couple of classes so he could read. I say a couple, maybe one. I don't want to over exaggerate. But what he did was he can hear a song and he can play that song. And we had a beautiful worship leader at our church, Liz Oslager, that brought him in at 13 and took him under her wing and showed him how to chord and showed him what to do, and took that natural gifting that God had given him and helped him take it into a level that he's the most beautiful praise and worship leader I've ever heard. And it's because he's an oral learner. It's because he hears. He hears it and he gets it. This is the way God made him. There was nothing wrong with him being an oral learner. And so if you have a child that's not getting it a certain way, don't get anxious. Go to the Lord and say, what am I doing? How can I do it better? That's all homeschooling is. If you do it one way, it doesn't work, do it another way. It's okay. For him, he eventually got it. He eventually worked his way into being able to read it. But we went through such a time where if we would have only known. So if you have a child that's struggling, work at it. See, are they a child that needs to stand? Some are. Are they a child that needs to just be in a little space by themselves? Some are. Do they have to hear it? Some do. And a lot of times that's why our children are failing in school, because they're just not being taught the correct way for them. Homeschooling is an individual thing. Even when you're teaching a lot of kids, it's individual. And that's how it's supposed to be. I hope this has helped. Remember, homeschooling is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And it's run by the whole family. Go out and enjoy the adventure. Goodbye.